until you at least hit $2 million in annual income from your church. I would outsource all of your financial reporting. I could almost make a case for $3 million, but I would definitely say $2 million. Why would Jim say something like that? Because there are people and entities out there who outsource this, who know church financials better than you do, and they can do what you're doing, what you're paying one person to do. They can do it better and for the same or less money, and provide you better information. They're working with hundreds of churches. They know church metrics. They know church financial reporting. They know what your boards are needing to look at. They know what you need to think in terms of oversight. Hello, friends. Jim Shepard with my faithful co-host, Frank Beeler. You showed back up again, buddy.
Hey-o.
Next Sunday.
Yeah,
It's the Next Sunday podcast, and we're here again.
Yeah, man. Anytime with you is a good time.
Well, anytime with you is a good time. We're always having a good time here on Next Sunday.
This works out.
You know, I hope everybody else is having as much fun with these things as you and I are.
Me too.
Do you think they are?
I get positive feedback, but I don't know that I would get negative feedback. I don't know that we've said anything so negative or bad or complicated where somebody's going to come like just rake us over the coals.
Yeah.
But I do get positive feedback. So we'll put that in the category
Well,
of
the people who are advising us, and of course, Leanne from our marketing team, they have other goals for this podcast. You and I have tried to keep it really simple. Really simple.
Right.
Don't get canceled.
Yeah, that's probably number one.
That's
number two
one.
would be somewhat helpful.
Because when you get a University of Tennessee graduate and a University of Georgia graduate who know each other really well and who can converse pretty well with each other, this could go really south in a really short frame of time. And we've tried not to let that happen.
That is so true.
So today, Frank, I don't talk about it a lot. People who know me, I don't hide it. It's on my bio. But, finances is my background. That's the thing I was taught to do when I came out of college.
Yeah.
And it's what I did for the first part of my career in the marketplace until I got here. And it's not something that I do out front here, but it's not something that I'm not well-versed in.
Yeah.
I just don't talk about it very often. So today we're going to talk about some of my observations about financial reporting, about budgeting, about how you do what you do at the local level. I've written about this some in the past, but I thought it'd be great for us to talk about that here today because I have a sense, I'm not saying it's wrong, I just have a sense there are a lot of things that people are doing at the local church level that are just not working for them in the way they hoped it would work. And maybe we can expose some of that today.
I think that's good. I mean, at the end of the day, we've got to make sure we're compliant.
Oh, well,
So
there's
we've got
that.
some stuff that's
There's that.
just right to
There's
do.
that.
Then there's a level of transparency that our congregation expects, of course. That requires some reporting. And if we don't get this reporting right, we're making decisions based on partial information or possibly wrong information that could determine how we do budgeting, forecasting, expansion of ministry, whatever it may be. And so we've got to get this right. We've got to feel the proper weight to get this right. Now, I'm probably one of the oddballs. I actually like the budgeting process. I really do enjoy it in churches and organizations.
That would make you an oddball, Frank. That would make you an oddball. I didn't think you were one. And then when you said that, I was like, well, that definitely qualifies.
Well, most people already knew that. So I'm glad that you finally came to that conclusion. Here's what I love about the budgeting process. I won't even say I like it. I love it. I love it, Jim. Here's what I love about the budgeting process. It gives us a chance to reflect and evaluate what we've been doing.
Love it.
And how good are we at projecting, understanding what's happening in our organization? So both growth, how are we good at projecting that, understanding that, the cost of care to operate what it is that we do. So it gives a chance to evaluate. It gives us a chance, it should be a journey of evaluating where are we going. And so looking ahead, we can't budget, we can't build the plan the right way unless we have the proper financial documentation. And when we have that, we can then look ahead. And I think it's more than going, let's do 10% more than last year, just roll it across all the different departments. Done. That is a way to budget, okay? I don't know that it's super effective. I think we determine some assumptions about where we're going and dream about what could be and should be and what initiatives can be built to get us there. But I like that. And then something that came up during my time at Elevation, we had a value that was this. We think inside the box. Everybody's talking about thinking outside the box. Okay. Well, the box for us is budgetary, staffing.
Mhm.
It's what God's entrusted to our care. And so, can we imagine some things greater? Yes. But at the end of the day, some people are spending so much time doing that, they're not stewarding well what they've been entrusted with. And so,
Yeah.
for us to go, okay, let's evaluate maybe when it comes to our budget, what is our box? What are we playing in? We don't have infinite money, we don't have infinite resources. So, we got to work with what we've got. And what's the proper allocation? And how do we steward well within the limitations that we have? And so, I love the exercise of budgeting because it allows me to build my box, understand what I'm working with. And then we can go, are we allocating resources properly? Are we evaluating properly? Where do we want to double down and spend more time, energy, and effort? All that comes through proper financial reporting and this budgeting process.
So here's what I would say, Frank, what I see out there. I see all the things that you just talked about. But what I see is most of the financial reporting systems that are in churches are not serving them well in what they're trying to accomplish. What I mean by that, first of all, in decision making, they don't have the right information for decision making. And secondly, they don't have the right information or the best perspective on that information to plan ministry.
Yeah.
Which is really the whole idea, right? And so for me, that's where it begins to break down. Many years ago, before I even became a CFO in a public company, I saw a leader. He was the CEO, and he was leading his financial team. And he asked 3 questions in a planning meeting. 3 questions. He said, "What is the optimistically the best outcome that we could see for the coming year?" I mean, just everything clicks. Revenue is high, expenses are low. What's the biggest and best we can see for the coming year? And they gave him that. And then he said, "What's the worst outcome that we could see for the coming year? Expenses at the highest, revenue at the lowest. What would that look like for the coming year?" And they were able to articulate that for him. And then he said, "What's most likely to happen?
Yeah.
What's the scenario in the middle?" Right? And when I became a CFO, that's what I adopted with my team, was there was always a 3 scenario financial planning mode that we went into. And so I was always prepared. Now, the CEO didn't always ask me about those other 2, but occasionally they would. "Hey, so looks like things are kind of taking a hiccup right now. What's the worst that could happen if things really went off in the wrong direction?" Right? I would say that for ministries as well. That could be a good perspective in terms of just thinking through it. I think the idea of, and I see a lot of churches that have moved into this. But when I came into this work, it seemed like almost all churches were doing calendar year for budget and financial reporting. A lot of churches have gone to what I call a fiscal year.
Yeah.
If it were me, hey, this is not the answer, it's an answer. If it were me, my fiscal year would be roughly August 1st through July 31st.
Yep.
A lot of people do June 1st through May 31st. A lot of them do July 1st through June 30th. That's it, 6 months and 6 months. I think those are all good iterations. For me, I like the August 1st one because it seems to line up the ministry year with the fiscal year, right? The ministry year kind of kicks off in August, September, and pretty much winds up, when you're into the spring and the summer. But whatever it is, so a lot of churches have moved from a calendar year to a fiscal year, which allows you to synchronize your numbers with your ministry. I think the other thing too, for me, what I love about that kind of reporting is it puts the biggest month of the year, not as your last month of your fiscal year, but it's right in the middle.
Yeah.
So you know what December does. And for many churches, that's a make or break year, but that sits right there. In my scenario, it sits as month number 5.
Yeah.
And then we have 7 more months to grow or adjust to that or whatever we need to do. But it puts it there. It also, for those of you, it gives you 2 year ends. So I've got a calendar year end, I've got a fiscal year end. If you like to celebrate year end, you got 2 year ends built in there. The second thing that I see that really is something that I would fix immediately is what I call calendarized versus straight line numbers. So straight line would be if I'm budgeting something to be, I'm just going to do this because I can do the math real easy. If I was going to budget a line item to be $600,000 for the year and I put $50,000 a month.
Yeah.
Well, that's not how it's going to happen.
No.
Put it, calendar right. That's straight line. calendarize it in such a way that the expense shows up in the month you expect it to hit, right? So there could be one month where 200,000 of that 600,000 hits.
Yeah.
There could be months where none of it hits,
Yep.
right? Try to schedule it, which allows you to predict cash flow better. Same thing is true for income. You can go back and look the last couple of years, and you can see what percentage of our total income did we receive in January,
Yeah.
what percentage in February, all the way down the line. And then, of course, December is probably going to be twice as big as any month. One of the ways that I look at it, just a simple way of looking at it, is that there are 13 months in a year, and December's 2 of them.
Yeah.
Think about that,
Absolutely.
because December tends to be twice as big as any other given month.
Yeah.
So calendarize your income numbers based on how it's come in over the past couple of years. And if you did those things, so you have your fiscal year lining up with your ministry year, and you're using calendarized versus straight line numbers, Frank, those two changes alone, there are other things.
Yeah.
Those two alone would give you substantially better information for decision-making on a monthly basis.
So why would somebody not do that?
I'm at a loss to tell you.
Okay,
I don't
that's
know.
fair. I mean, that wasn't a stage question, guys. I was just curious.
I don't. I really am at a loss to tell you why you wouldn't do that. It does seem pretty obvious. Tradition. We've always done it that way. Lack of help. Lack of other things. By the way, let me pause and jump in here real quick. This is going to rub some people the wrong way, but I just need to say this because it is something that I see a lot. If it were me, and this is not putting this on everybody, because maybe you do have the right person and your system is streamlined and you'd say, no, Jim, you haven't seen my church. All of that is good. But I would say until you at least hit $2 million in annual income from your church, I would outsource all of your financial reporting.
Wow.
All right?
Yep.
I want to say that again. Until you reach about $2 million a year. I could almost make a case for $3 million, but I would definitely say $2 million. I would outsource all of your financial reporting. Why is that, Frank? Why would Jim say something like that? Because there are people and entities out there who outsource this, who know church financials better than you do, and they can do what you're doing, what you're paying one person to do. They can do it better and for the same or less money. And provide you better information. They're working with hundreds of churches. They know church metrics. They know church financial reporting. They know what your boards are needing to look at. They know what you need to think in terms of oversight. They can do it better than you can do. And I know that's not popular. And I know that some of you are like, oh, Jim, you have no idea. But I would urge you to consider that because financial reporting is such an integral part. Why wouldn't you let somebody else do it if they can do it better than you can? Right now, you're still posting all the money and collecting all the money and doing all that locally, but they're doing all the financial reporting offsite. And there's some entities that do that extremely well.
That's so good. Okay, let's get away from that. We got it. Where do we go? What are the common pitfalls? Where are people getting this wrong when they're trying to do it themselves, when they're looking at this for decision making, no matter when the fiscal year operates? Where are they making a mistake when it comes more often than not in the way they're looking at their finances and handling their reporting?
I think there's a couple of things, Frank. A 12-month trend can be deceiving.
Okay.
If you're looking at, say, or even the year-to-date trend can be deceiving sometimes, right? I would always be looking at a rolling 12 months, and I would be taking a really close look at what's happening in the most recent 6 months.
Okay.
Because you could actually have a positive trend in 12 months, and the last 6 months could be unearthing a negative trend that you're not even seeing yet.
Wow. Yeah.
That you're not even seeing yet.
Yeah.
If it were me, I would probably have the 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months rolling to say, what is the 12 months? So when I say 12 months rolling, that always means a month rolls off and a new month comes on. So in my financial reporting, we're sitting here in early October 2024. I would be looking at October of 23 through September of 24. I'd be looking at January through September of 24. In other words, current fiscal year. I'd be looking at April through September for the most recent 6 months. I'd be looking at all three and say, are they telling me the same thing? By the way, The most recent 6 months could tell me there's an upward trend, a significant upward trend
Sure.
that's happening in the life of my church. I want to be on top of that as well,
Yeah.
right? So to let the recent trend inform what the longer term trend is doing, so I have better information. So rolling 12 months
Yeah.
with also consideration of 6 months, 3 months, just to isolate it and give you the picture of what's really happening inside of that.
That's good.
And that would, I think for a lot
Yeah.
of churches, that would make a really big difference if they looked at it that way.
So I'm going to tie the two things you just said together, the trend and the calendaring and operating that way.
Yeah.
I want to make a statement that's an unfair projection on the leaders that are listening. Okay.
So you're saying some people are not going to like what you're about to say. They're not going to like what you're about to say. By the way, remember on the next Sunday podcast, part of what we're trying to do is to disrupt the status quo.
Yeah.
Not in an unfair way, not in just a purely disruptive way, so that you can rethink what you've been doing and either A, decide to keep doing that for the right reasons, or to keep doing it or to start doing it another way. So this is one of those moments, just like a minute ago when I said outsourcing, we're not afraid to confront the status quo. It feels like we're ruffling your feathers, but we're not ruffling your feathers just to ruffle your feathers. We want to disrupt the status quo and give you potentially a better way. Frank, I just kind of introduced that because you're about to say something that's not going to set well.
I feel like it'll agitate people.
You're a prophet.
If I do straight line accounting in my church, my level of accountability goes down because I just point to it all catches up at the end of the year. And there's no strategy behind that. There's no conversation. The trends don't matter. They don't, I mean, it's what, if I'm looking at it through that lens of it all catched up at the end of the year and I do straight line budgeting in my forecasting, I'm always behind, virtually always behind. And so what do? You just look at it and just point to later and go, oh, it's all going to catch up at the end of the year. It eliminates proper accountability for the most part because now I have an excuse for everything. And so I just want to challenge and say, I don't think that's people's heart, but it can creep in as laziness and ineffective for us to evaluate financial reporting and do it the right way when our answer for every budgetary conversation, every time we go in front of the board, every time we go in front of the congregation, we're like, well, as you know, December counts as a double month. So it's all going to work itself out. And we miss trend lines. We miss proper evaluation because we're not properly forecasting. And from my perspective. And so it's easy to just kind of point to later. And then I don't have to do any work now or change any of my behaviors.
That was so good. That was amazing. You're not even a financial guy. You said all that.
I'm just being honest.
Right? So here's the thing, Frank. Here's what I can point to. So that's why it's so important to calendarize and then also to do an actual versus budget projection, right? So let's just think about my analogy. If I start my fiscal year in August, almost every time the month of August is going to run negative.
Right.
Because all of your expenses are there, and it's when your people are starting to get back from vacation. Although with a lot of people being online, giving online, that's not as much true as it used to be, but it still is. August tends to be one of the lower months when you've got full expense. So I might show, for example, let's just say I ran my P&L for the month, and the actual says that we lost $25,000 for the month. So you're like, golly, that was not a very good month.
Yeah.
But wait a second. I actually projected when I did my calendarized expenses and revenue, I projected we were going to be 40,000 in the red. So we actually outperformed our budget by doing $15,000 better. Now you have an understanding of that, not to your point. It's like, well, it just all catches up in the end. No, that's not the point. You need to have monthly, timely information for seeing what's really happening so that you can make good decisions based on what's happening, not on what you think is happening.
Making good decisions. Let's get there. We got to make good decisions. I know a church leader, okay? Many church leaders. One came to mind.
One came to mind. And we're not going to give a name.
That will intentionally, at the end of the year, when they're getting ready to do their budgeting, will decrease income projections, have everybody cut expenses accordingly because it feels better in January to be positive right out the gate. I find that to be odd because I'm sitting there going, at the end of the day. We have a 12-month calendar, however you choose to kind of lay it out or whatever. The ebbs and flows of expenses and income, they happen in ministry. Like it's just a reality.
Of course. Yeah.
But if we're afraid of that negative in August, even if we may have projected that we're going to be negative 37,000, we end up negative 25, that is a very positive thing to do. It still is negative. And so I don't know that we need to budget or forecast or plan our ministry around how we feel about the number when whether it's positive or negative. It's more about how did it go against budget versus actuals and where we go from there. And so I just say that to say, whatever about that one specific instance, but what I've seen is that there is more emotion tied to financials and financial reporting that I think most of us would actually be comfortable with.
Oh my, isn't that true? So I love that you're bringing this in because it's kind of, it's one of those things that nobody talks about, but it's always behind the scenes or seems to be very frequently behind the scenes. And it's something I had to deal with even when I was in the marketplace as a CFO of a public company. And I had to say this over and over and over again to our department heads in particular as they were turning in their budgets. Maintain objectivity.
Wow.
Maintain objectivity.
Yeah.
Don't let your emotions get in here. Don't let your feelings get in here. Don't let your hoped for, outcomes get in here. What do you need to win?
Yeah.
What do you need to win in terms of projecting your, back then we were investing a lot into hardware, information technology hardware. I mean, mainframes cost a lot of money. They don't cost that much anymore, but you just got to get servers, right?
Yeah.
But mainframe hardware, your CapEx and everything, just tell us what you need.
Right.
And then we would always do what we call a mid-year adjustment. So we would let the leaders come in at mid-year and offer an adjustment. It's surprising to me the number of churches that think that once you adopted a budget, that's it for the whole year.
Oh, absolutely not.
Why wouldn't you just come in and say, a couple of months before mid-year, how are we doing so far? Are we still good for the rest of the way? Right? And then one of my favorite ways of forecasting, Frank, would be this, is take whatever the months are that have run actual. So let's just say we're in January. We've come through January with my fiscal year. That would be the first 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So I would always do what I call an actual plus budget. So I'd put the actual numbers in for August, September, October, November, December, January, the budget numbers in for the remaining 6 months and show my CEO, here's what I think we're going to do for the year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so meaningful when you see that. When you see your actual numbers plus your projected numbers now becomes your projected for the full year, right? And then obviously you keep going through the year. And at some point, you've got 10 months actual and 2 months budget, 11 plus 2. But it becomes a very informative way of looking at the numbers. Again, another perspective. I like kind of holding it up and looking at the various ways. You say, which one is right and which one is wrong? And I say, all of them are helpful.
Yeah.
And probably all of them are better than what you're doing right now, which is the whole point of this podcast, is to help you to see there are ways of looking at your numbers that you haven't considered that would make you better in terms of the information you have at your disposal to make the decisions for ministry.
That's so good, Jim. Jim, I want to pivot for just a second. Unscripted, not in the questions, not in the notes anywhere.
Uh-oh.
In the last episode, we were talking about young leaders.
Yes.
We were talking about your recent trip to the UK.
Yep.
And hearing from NT Wright, Tom, as we'll now know him as.
Tom.
So good old Tom. One of the things that impressed you by the churches there and things that Tom had said and throughout that conversation was how dependent the churches and leaders in the UK were on the Holy Spirit. Jim, where does the Holy Spirit show up when we're talking about all this?
Wow, Frank, that's such a good question because it would be, as a financial guy, I know there's a temptation to just rely on the numbers, right? And I think one of the places where where I think you could definitively draw the Holy Spirit in would be to say, okay, Lord, just to go away and do planning. We've done all of our planning. What would you want us to do for next year? Would you show us something that you want us to do?
Yeah.
Maybe what he wants to do is he wants you to put your vision in front of his vision for your church in front of your people. And, with the power and the presence of the Holy Spirit to ask, what would you be willing to do for next year?
Yeah.
Right? So maybe it's not 8%. Maybe it's not 10%. Maybe God would have you to give 28% more next year, but you haven't cast vision for that. and you
Yeah.
would put that out there for your people. So I think there is a place where we have to be careful that our numbers and our planning and our decision making doesn't quench the work of the Holy Spirit that He wants to do in and through our church. So I think that's a really good question. It's a good caveat for us.
Yeah.
Don't let the budget become an idol. It's a guidepost. It's a marker along the way. It's not hard coded that this is what it is. It's a guidepost for us in terms of seeing that.
So I'm going to say another zinger. I don't know. I'm full of those today.
You got
maybe.
zingers today. You're
Yep.
testing me, brother.
It's all right. Too many financial meetings in churches don't start with prayer.
Mm.
It's like we've already got our day going. We had a staff meeting or whatever, and now we're just jumping in. The task of administrative work that is financials.
Yeah.
And so I think that we'd be well served by our accounting departments and finance departments, whether it be volunteer or staff, doesn't matter, to be invited and encouraged by their pastor leader to incorporate prayer in the process, because the numbers are the numbers. The actuals are the actuals. You don't get to pray a different number. You can hope that God gives you a different number. Things change, whatever it may be.
You wouldn't be saying, Holy Spirit, while we're coming before you, would you change the numbers on this page? Because that's not going to happen.
That's not going to work.
Not going to happen.
That's not going to work. And that will be a whole different issue with transparency if we go just changing stuff. But I do think that there's great value in when we talk finances, when it's part of a broad board or elder meeting, oftentimes prayer is incorporated at the very beginning. But if we're dropping into budgeting, we're dropping into financial planning, it feels like a lot of the meetings I've been in the past, that's not been the spiritual element, the spiritual guidance necessary through the Holy Spirit. It's not intentionally excluded, but I don't know that it's intentionally included either.
Yeah, I would say this is not just a cognitive exercise. It should be a spiritual exercise as well. And that's such a good word, Frank, for us to bring in, the power and the presence of God through His Holy Spirit to show us what would you have us to see here, Lord, and how would you have us to move forward? Yeah, because like anything, our numbers can become an idol. We become too attached to them, and we don't see the work that God really wants for us in front of us. Yeah.
Oftentimes, our elders and board members would not run their organization using the same financial metrics and data that we're providing from the church. They're looking for more. They're looking for clarity. They're looking for insights. And sometimes they don't feel comfortable to push. Hopefully they do. But it would be an interesting exercise if you're going, I don't know. I mean, everybody seems to be happy, and I give them the numbers and they go over it and it goes pretty smooth. Like it's pretty good. It would be interesting for some of you listening to this podcast, and maybe this specific episode got forwarded to you and you've never listened to Next Sunday before, but your pastor or somebody was like, hey, I want you to listen to this one. It'd be an interesting exercise to say, hey, if I were to get some more reports, or if I would take a different approach, what would you be looking for? What's missing in this summary that we're presenting? Is there any other insights or things that you're curious about that could come up or be helpful? You may find that there's some invaluable tools that will get board members and elders more engaged in the process of helping you figure out where to go next and forecasting and things like that, if we provide them that next layer of detail.
Totally, Frank. And I think that's such a good word for the leaders as we kind of talk through this, that all of this subject matter is make sure that you're taking the macro view of how this can serve you. How can this data serve you?
Yeah.
Not how can it become your idol, but how can it serve you, right? I think there's a couple of things that I'd add here at the end as just a couple of thoughts I'd throw in. One of them is, if I were in charge of finances at a local church level, not every year, but every now and then, every 3 or 4 years maybe, I would do a zero-based budgeting rhythm.
Yeah,
right?
Totally agree.
Because what happens is, here's what happens. If your department had, let's just say, a $50,000 line item for this year, your natural planning process is going to be, well, I'm going to get 50,000 plus some percentage above that. Zero-based budget says, Frank, I want you to take that apart, start with zero, and build up from zero. What do you need next year to win in your area of ministry?
Wow.
Right? It's a forced discipline to start over and think through this in a way that it clarifies things. Because what can happen? Look, for the best of us, And it happened to us back when I was in a publicly held company. I've seen it in churches. For the best of us, excess accumulates.
Yeah.
Excess accumulates in the budget, and we don't see it. But if you strip it down and start from zero, you'll see it, and then you'll just be asking for, here's what I really need.
Yeah.
And hey, what if 50,000 is what I had last year? I only spent 42, right? And if I looked at the 42, I probably only needed 39 of that if I built it up from zero,
Yeah.
which is me being a better steward of the resources that our people have committed to the church. We owe that to our people,
Yeah.
that we're trying our best to steward what they have given back to the church
Yeah.
to be used for God's ministry, right? And then you mentioned this one a second ago, and I know we want to talk about this before we leave, and that's transparency.
Yeah.
Transparency and reporting. The thing that comes to mind, I have a client right now who have decided that they want to eliminate their multi-site, the accumulated mortgage debt on their campuses.
Okay.
Okay. Noble.
Yep.
All for it. You know what the problem is?
What's that?
The people in the church have no idea that this mortgage debt is actually there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And this is not a church that's operating in the dark.
Mhm.
They just don't talk about it a lot.
Mhm.
I think their finances have integrity. I mean, I've seen them.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any problem with integrity there. The issue is awareness. Their people have no awareness of this. And what I would say is that your people, they don't get the same information that your board and your finance committee get, but they need to see something,
Yeah.
right? And I'm not a big fan of the numbers in the bulletin or anything like that, because most of the time, I'm just going to be honest, Frank, most of the numbers I see, I'd like to think that having 32 years in church consulting, having a background in financial reporting, and having seen not just public company financial statements, but all the church financial statements that I've seen over the years,
Mhm.
I'd like to think if there's one thing that I might actually be good at,
Yeah.
it would be understanding church numbers.
Mhm.
And almost all of the church numbers that I see in a bulletin or in that little column or wherever I have no clue what they mean,
Yeah.
because it takes context.
No context.
Right. And a lot of them, by the way, a lot of them are just straight line reported.
Mhm.
Our income for the year, we're expecting 360,000, 3.6 million, whatever the number is, and then they're just applying that for, 300,000 a month or,
Yeah.
or $3,000, $30,000 a month, whatever it is. It's like, that's not going to happen. And they're reporting and it shows a deficit or, whatever. It's just like, it's not helpful.
Yeah.
Tell them more. Not what the finance committee gets, but tell them more. And the better place to do that would be on your website, maybe on the giving page. Click here for our year-to-date financial report,
Yeah.
right? And you've got maybe some numbers. If it were me, I would not only have the numbers, I'd have a brief clip from somebody who would explain what the numbers are. Hey, my name's Jim. I'm on the finance committee here at our church, and I want to just walk you through the September numbers and tell you what we see year-to-date. Right? Just in some
So good.
basic categories
Yeah.
to help people understand. Here's what I would say too. I see a big shift in the church generationally when it comes to transparency.
Mm.
Boomers will actually give you a pass for it because they're used to seeing that thing in the bulletin or whatever.
Yeah.
Gen X are kind of neutral toward it.
Mhm.
But once you get down to millennials and absolutely in Gen Z,
Mhm.
they are all about transparency.
Yeah.
In other words, if you're not transparent, it's almost like they're thinking you have something to hide.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to attract younger givers, transparency is going to be one of your required elements in terms of attracting them.
That's so good. As we wrap up this episode, is there anything we didn't cover or hit that you're wanting to make sure that our audience hears or is challenged by or processes that gives them a little perspective?
I think the whole idea today, Frank, we've said it is, let this be a wake-up call for you to whatever you're doing. Go back and take some of these. We're not saying that we have a right answer. There are lots of ways to get there. We're just trying to shake up the whole idea of financial reporting and what you're doing. What I see is too much of same old, same old, same old. It's not serving senior leaders well. It's not serving the boards in decision making. Frank, you may actually listen to everything we've said, talk about all the methods we've used, and you may decide that your method is still better than
For
that.
sure.
And that would be a win for you.
Yeah.
But go back and take a look at it and make sure that you're doing the thing that gives your leadership team, both the staff leadership team and the board, the best information for making good, sound ministry decisions going forward. And I think that would be a good outcome.
That's so good, Jim. Well, hey, listen, this has been another episode of Next Sunday. We hope that you found it helpful. We hope that it impacts your days and weeks to come. As always, we don't talk about this a lot, but I just want to make sure you're aware of this. Jim, who leads Generis has a bajillion resources available to church leaders as they're navigating all this stuff financially. There's all kinds of free ebooks and resources. So I encourage you, go to generis.com and find more. Pass them on to a ministry leader or a church leader, or if you are a church leader, set up an account where you can download, put your name and email address, and download a bunch of resources. Lean in on those. Let those be some guides for you. You don't have to start from scratch. And as always, we're here to help. Thank you again for tuning in next Sunday. We'll see you again soon.